Following is a local resident producers program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Access Television, the City of Oshkosh, the Oshkosh Cable Television Advisory Commission, or Time Warner Cable.
Hentz here along with Dan Rylance, and in this edition we're very pleased to be joined by a longtime Winnebago County Board supervisor since 1978. As a matter of fact, our guest has been serving. Joe Maehl is here. Joe serves the part of the district in Neenah, and the reason he's here is well, there's a little bit of history that goes with this. He submitted his nomination papers, and one of his challengers, or his only challenger, I guess, as the case may be, challenged some of the signatures on those papers and got 4 of them, I guess, disqualified, meaning that Joe lost his spot on the ballot. So, but he's going to run as a write-in. He's not giving up
Indeed. That's right.
not giving up the ship yet. So we're here to talk a little bit with Joe tonight about you know, what happened and you know, the steps that he took to try and appeal this, if he did take any, and what his plans are for running, hopefully for him, a successful write-in campaign. So Joe, welcome. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you. Good
So
to be here.
I kind of set the stage a little bit here. You know, like any candidate, you were out circulating nomination papers in the dead of winter in December and so forth, and you turned them in late December, early January, and
Well,
the next thing you heard was what?
Well, it seems that when you go house to house and the folks you don't know, the last thing you say to them, have you signed this before? Or have you signed it yet for anybody? It's not that at all. What it is that December 2nd or 3rd, the first week of December, my opponent got his papers signed and sent in. And I think he has 60-some signatures. And I've been doing this for quite a few years, to say the least. And we had a little well, a situation with the family and some sickness. And so it was the 16th of the month that I got my signatures. And it so happens that I got 53. You have to have 50. And usually I get 75 or 80. And so again, late winter, snow, ice, I got the 53. I handed them in. And a couple days later, Sue Ortmer, our clerk, said it was challenging because the same signatures, 4 of them, on the gentleman's paper as well as mine. And so, well, gee whiz, what's that all about?
And they must have signed on your opponent, your challenger, Bill Rowe's papers, earlier than when they signed yours.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the way the law reads, and it's really an interpretive law, as most laws are really, but voluntarily, the 4 people who signed both pages for the other gentleman and myself voluntarily wrote a letter, had it notarized and sent it in, wanted to change their vote to my favor, if you will. And the reason for it is because the inference was I wasn't going to run anymore. And so they just wanted to change it. So sent that down to the election board in Madison. And again, in the bureaucratic mindset, oh, it's the date. It's the date, that's the only thing that counts, is the date. And yes, but these folks voluntarily would like to change their vote. And because the vote isn't until April, why not give it a consideration? Oh no, it's the date. Well, the old story, you can't fight City Hall, but I wish I had, I've got the time, but I sure wish I had the money to fight that, because what you're doing, in my opinion, is that you're taking the people away from their choice of who they want to vote for. You know, because it's signing that, yes, you were there, you endorse it, and so on. So rather than getting into a shin-kicking contest, it was disappointing to me not being on the ballot. I have no compunction about the gentleman wanting to get into the fray and taking it from there, but by the same token, the fact that he won't be on the ballot is disconcerting. So what I'm doing is, oh, by the way, and on top of that, we have redistricting, and there's a whole host of new areas and people that would be represented there. And not that that's a difficulty, but the situation is very prominent that to let the people know who you are, what you've been doing, and why. And so I'm not on the ballot, but I'm writing a very emphatic, fact-filled letter to the people, and hopefully that they will write in the name, or, as I also will supply them with, is a pressure-sensitive label with the name printed on for it, you know. And
So
if
they
they
can just
don't,
peel that off and put that right on the ballot in
That's
April
right.
then? Okay.
so if they lose that, fine, but please bring this with you because this is how you spell the name. You know, so write it in. So I hope that that would do it in lieu of being, you know, the old story on a ballot. You have different names and you make the choice. But when you have one name and then a blank, you say, oh, well, there's no choice. But if I can get the word out, pardon me, when I do get the word out.
There you go. Well, I have a question for you. You mentioned about, you know, they should make sure that the name is spelled right. Now, you know, you're a poll worker, Dan, and you've been at this game for a long time, Joe.
Excuse me.
I guess, you know, if someone is writing a person's name on the ballot, if they have it spelt wrong, you know, does that still count? If it's just, you know, because your name is spelled M-A-E-H-L. If someone spells it M-E-A, or they don't have the H in there, or if, I guess what I'm asking is, if the intent is there, does that write-in still count for you?
If you're asking me, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, but you don't know for certain.
But I really don't.
Okay.
As a
all
poll worker, yes, it's the intent of the voter.
Okay.
If there's one letter that's mixed or misspelled,
Okay, all right.
if I was deciding, I would say absolutely. The intent of the voter was to vote for this person, and one letter is missing
Okay,
or something.
all
See,
right.
that's interesting because there you said the word intent.
Yes.
And that was my situation with the electors down in Madison. The intent. Here's an affidavit of sound mind and body, and I goofed. I want to change the vote, you know, the intent. But that's past tense.
Was your district changed for
Yes.
this election?
Yeah, quite a few of our districts.
Okay, now I did a little checking today, and I was told that the county clerk sent out letters to some of the candidates that they had signatures from their old district, and that they had to replant. Did that happen to you too?
Yes.
So you had really two deficiencies. You had deficiencies initially where you had people from your old district that weren't in your district now, in addition to the 4 that were challenged.
Yeah.
So you had 2 problems with signatures.
Well, yes, but with that was corrected, meaning
Okay.
the first phase
The
of
first phase, yeah.
it. Had 53 total authorized
Okay.
and verified, if I may, from the county clerk.
Okay.
And then the 4 were, shall we say, duplicates.
Okay,
you know,
gotcha.
and that's where it came.
So you were actually only down 4 votes total then?
Yeah, and
which,
that makes it
you know,
49.
Yeah.
You have to have 50.
Yeah.
Come on. There you go.
There is an issue between you and your opponent, and the issue is clearly the size of the county board. Isn't that correct? That he's running, he was active in the group that wanted to get the petition on the ballot to reduce the size, and he's been a member attending the board meetings for a long time. So isn't the issue between you two that you voted only to reduce the board by 2, and he was a member of the petition group that wanted to cut it in half? Is that a correct?
Well, I have to say, in all total honesty and candor, I haven't heard that, or I don't know that.
Okay.
And I'm not doubting it.
Okay.
But if that's what he wants to do, he's wrong, because the people that just emphasize the fact in this day and age, downscaling, economy. The first thing you think of in business, in a big group, is, oh, if it's less, it's going to cost less. What he doesn't know, or anybody that really thinks of that, is the idea that when the state and the federal people say, you will have this, that, the other, meaning committees and jurisdiction of these committees, you will have this, you're going to create nothing more than some professional politicians. There's no question about that. And the idea that it would be economically saving, no way. Absolutely not. Period. Black and white. No way can that be a saving.
But the issue for the petitioners isn't on that argument. The issue is that the board, including your vote, thumbed your noses at the petitioners and did a roundabout and just reduced it by 2 and stopped their plan to get that petition on the ballot. So his
Stopped
argument,
their intent.
Their intent, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the issue, as I understand it, on these people, is that you guys kind of, did them in.
Okay. Now, go back to the front.
Okay.
George Washington turns to his friend Tommy Jefferson. We've got this great bit of western area. Tell us what we should do with it. So 2 years later, he came back and had specifics to state. And he said, first of all, there will never be slavery in this area, which is Michigan,
Right.
Wisconsin.
Northwest Ordinance of 1787.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Oh, you read that, right? you weren't. No, you weren't there.
I'm surprised you were. I was.
But anyhow, that's true. The Northwest Ordinance. What are we going to do with it? There will never be slavery,
Right.
and there hadn't been.
Right.
And during the big Civil War, it wasn't even a question about it. And every 36 square miles will have a school.
That's right.
And with the school, if you're going to be self-governed, you have to be educated, right? And then the other last thing is one man, one vote. And so, once again, it's very interesting to see how this all evolves. Because of the 50 states we have, only 6 states have town government. We're one of the 6. And so is that a duplication? Well, it depends upon how you view our wonderful world of democracy, our country. And I think it works well. Yes, in some ways they stumble over each other, they, meaning the towns, cities, and so on, and sometimes the counties. But still, it's the idea of the self-governing. And anytime you want to bring a board of 38 down to 15, 16, everybody on Washington Street in Oshkosh would represent the county. And the point is...
Explain that, Joe. I don't understand that. What do you mean?
Well, in other words, it would be everybody at large.
Well, no, they were still having districts. They still wanted districts.
Yeah, they would still want districts, but once again, when you make lesser districts, the districts get larger.
True.
And when you look at the map and see how it overlaps, and it leads to that. Oh, and then the last thing that Tom said to George, he said, with the one man, one vote, you eliminate the potential for mischief. Because when I had the privilege of I was president of the Wisconsin Counties Association, and that was an exciting time because you represent all 72 counties. And you go to Washington, and then you have lunch with your counterparts. Very, very nice fellow in California. And we had lunch and said, how many's on your board? And he said, well, all California have 5 on all their boards. How many you have? 38. You know, well, here's a grown man that almost had an apoplexy, you know, fell off in his chair. And, gee, my good Lord. And the first thing comes out of the mouth, how do you get anything done? Are you kidding me? The situation is very simple because, once again, as Tom said to George, to eliminate the potential of mischief. And so when Walmart comes in and said, I want to put a building in your town, your area, your city, whatever. So in the small 3-5-man operation, the chairman looks over at his brother-in-law and says, go buy the property and go see what happens. And then the rest is history. And so the other, this fellow that I had lunch with in California, you know, he just couldn't imagine how we could get along with 38 people, you know, and well, with 5, you know. And so with 5, they make $78,000 a year. The chairman, who they elect each individually, makes $10,000 more. They get a new car every year. They have a staff of 8 people each. They get full compensation for their hospitalization, as well as life insurance and retirement. And he said with a straight face, it's almost a full-time job. So California is California.
Okay.
And also, when I came back from that meeting, it was interesting. In Orange County, it was declared bankrupt. Interesting. You know, so small. If this is what the gentleman who wants my job, I think it's misbegotten. That's not economy.
I want to play with George and Tom just for one more thing. What would George, that is George Washington, and Tom Jefferson, think of all of these districts that you've reorganized, and there are no candidates running?
Uh-huh.
And so what sort of democracy is that? That the chairman of the board will have to go and pick
That's right.
somebody. That's not democracy either, is it?
Well, no, but by the same token, it shows what can I expect after I get elected?
Okay.
That's a hypothetical thing. Well, you'll get a lot of phone calls, you get a lot of letter, you get a lot of hate mail, vilification, and so on. And what can I expect the second year? Well, you get used to it. The point is, it's not a glamorous job in any shape or form. And so when you hit the fan with all that situation,
So there are people not running because they're afraid they're going to catch hell, as
Oh.
opposed to maybe we have too many districts and we can't find candidates to run?
absolutely. And then the other thing is, oh, I'm not in it for money. I'm because we're here for a civic duty. All right, fine. So $40 for a meeting is a lot different than $78,000 a year, you know, and $40 a meeting and so on, no benefits. Big deal. I mean, that's, you're doing your civic duty, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so,
Well,
no, that's, excuse me, but
no, go ahead.
If, and I'm not challenging it, but if that's what he thinks it should be, well, that's interesting. It's wrong, and it's absolutely not verifiable that it would be saving any money or it'd be expeditious.
let's talk about what your plans are. You've kind of alluded to them a little bit. I mean, obviously, mounting a write-in campaign is, you know, it's a challenge in and of itself, as you
Yes.
no doubt already know. It's not often successful. That doesn't mean it can't be. You've got a couple challenges here. Your district, you've lost, because of the redistricting, you've lost a lot of the constituents that you've had for, you know, 20, 30 years. Since 1978, you've had a lot of these people. You've also got some new people that you've never represented who have just come into this district by virtue of the redrawing of the map. You know, so how do you plan to reach out to these folks? Do you intend to do a lot of door-to-door stuff? You're going to do the mailers. You know, we'll hopefully be able to get this show up there. But what else do you plan to do? What's your plan of attack?
You said it all right there, is the door-to-door. But also, I thought maybe the letter I have states right away, this is not a
Oh,
plea.
Joe, we've lost your microphone.
Where am I?
You know, oh, it's on the floor. Here, I'll get it for you. Just hang on 1 second. There we go. And I'm just going to put it right here. Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
So door to door, and the letter, you were talking about the letter.
The first thing I say in the letter, you don't need any more mail, neither do I. But I would ask you to spend a minute to read this. It is not a plea for funds, number one. But please take the time to read it. And I briefly, very briefly say about why I want you to read it. I'm not on the ballot, but I've been there for many years. I want to continue. And some of the things I've been personally involved in, that the old adage about new blood, fine. But with the old blood that has been imbued within the county, it's exciting to me to know that everything that I've done will be there for the grandchildren's grandchildren. And that's exciting. So therefore, I like to itemize, I will and have itemized certain things.
One suggestion, if you bring a sticker and you put on the ballot, and you put that ballot into the scanner, I'm not sure the scanner is going to read that sticker. You better check with that, because it might be better for them to take the pen that is compatible with the machine and have them write in your name. I'm not sure that the machine is going to count your stickered write-in votes.
Well, a good point.
Yeah,
Good point.
check. I guess
Yeah.
Sue Erkmer would
Yeah,
probably know
yeah.
Yeah.
if
Not
if
sure
that
it'll
would
read
work
it.
or not. Because I do know that Julie Pagel, when she mounted a write-in campaign some years ago for clerk of courts, she used mailing labels too. But I think the machines have probably
Yeah, I would
changed over
just-
the years.
Just
so.
double check on that, Joe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I will.
Yeah.
So, kind of tell us a little bit. You know, we're sort of running out of time, but you know, give us a little snapshot of some of the things that you've been involved in. You've served on a list of committees that is probably as long as your arm. You know, so tell us a little bit about what you've been involved in over the years.
On the corner of Murdoch and Jackson, the old fairgrounds.
Okay.
So I took some people through there on a tour and wanted to show why I think it had to have been upgraded. And we were up in the grandstand. I'm sure a lot of your viewers remember that.
Even I remember that.
Jeez. Whoa. And so I threw the light switch to get a little more, well, just to lighten up the place, and it started an arc. And that was scary, because that's, you know, an 80-year-old wooden building. And so we had and have county-owned property, which is now Sunnyview. So when I brought the resolution in to sell the old area and move to Sunnyview, I almost lost my citizenship, you know, because nobody has greater respect for tradition than myself. And so, but the board saw the feasibility of it, and it's worked beautifully. And it's been a very, very positive thing. And the only thing I regret, no, that's the wrong word. The only thing that is interesting that never got a thank you card from the city of Oshkosh. Can you imagine the hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes that came from that area now, which is
Sure.
a needed area? You know, it's beautiful, with good business.
Yeah.
Anyhow, that, the University of Wisconsin, Fox Valley, that is the keynote.
That's one of your pride and joys, isn't it?
Yeah, it truly is.
Yeah.
And
And the Military Museum?
yes, indeed.
You've worked very hard on that.
And also the fact that when it came to pass about having the deadbeat dads, you know, how does that work? Well, you come into the idea and have Madison use us as the test case. So urging Madison to give us the authority to, how does it work? Well, let's do it, and so on. So Human Services, and they get into that. Now it's not only the law of Wisconsin, it's the law of the land.
Mm-hmm.
The land. 50 states, it started in Winnebago County. I mean, things like that, I think is very, very positive. As I briefly mentioned about the University of Wisconsin Fox Valley, and a world-class operation, meaning with the planetarium, and the fact that Tommy Thompson deemed it our gem area for the stones and what have you, the geology. That's the Wisconsin State facility. Also, in the days where, when I first came on the board, the vice chair of the board at that time wanted to sue the fellow that made the parking lot for the school. And it seems that he had potholes in there, and he's very upset. It was 20 years old, meaning when it was put in. That kind of thinking had to be changed, because when we called, when people referred to the extension, they automatically thought University of Wisconsin, the extension, oh, that's an extension of high school. Also, you know of a situation where people have taken courses, gotten their degree, and then they want to transfer and continue, be it Madison or wherever, Stevens Point, and they weren't transferable. That took 2.5 years, but that was my shining hour, so to speak.
Sure.
Is that not only is it applicable and it works and it is acknowledged for the credit, but it also works for any Big Ten school.
Sure. Well, Joe, we're out of time, but
Oh,
you know,
why don't
you
we
have,
just reel it again and keep on going? You know.
But there's no question. I mean, we've barely scratched
Excuse
the
me.
surface of the committees and so forth that you have served on since 1978. And you know, best of luck in your write-in campaign.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being here. We're going to take a very short break. When we come back, we'll be joined by Dr. Jim Simmons from the university, who will give us a recap on this past week's election. We'll be right back.
Thank you again.
We just escaped.
I escaped by foot.
And ran across the border.
I couldn't practice my religion.
I was put to work in forced labor camps.
If I stay in Cambodia, I would have been dead by now.
If you think differently, then you're an enemy.
If you know how to read and write, you're dead. You speak your mind, you're dead.
The only way to express what I wanted to do was to get out.
I got to the country when I was about 14 years old.
I was 20.
I was 24.
I came here with nothing. No money, no English.
America stood for freedom, it stands for freedom, and that's what all my generation, young generation, wanted to be there.
For the first time, I felt like I have a right to be on this earth.
Here, you can do whatever you want to do.
I love my life here. I feel at home.
I'm free to do what I want.
Freedom to me means my life.
How you doing?
Hi.
Hi.
Have a nice day.
You too.
Thanks.
If only child abuse were this easy to recognize. If you even suspect abuse, call 1-800-4-A-CHILD. All calls are anonymous and confidential. Trust your instincts.
Poor nutrition today will increase Sarah's chances of anemia, add to her healthcare costs, sick days, even stunt her ability to learn. And the thing is, Sarah's not even born yet. Get proper nutrition before it's too late. Call or visit WIC. WIC provides nutrition information, healthcare referrals, even food. Your child has you, and you have WIC.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Oshkosh. We're pleased to be joined now by Dr. Jim Simmons, political science professor from the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh. We're going to talk about, the election that, just as we're taping this, was being concluded 48 hours ago. Two issues primarily on this ballot. One was the primary for the local school board, and the other, of course, was the presidential primary. So I guess we're going to talk about the school board first. Kind of an interesting turnout, I guess, but the way the paper is calling it, it says the headlines read, "Primary sends mixed message to school board." What do you make of the election?
Well, I think it's a bit more of a directed message. It's confused in this sense. Normally, school board races are low turnout, and the people who vote in school board elections, if that's the only thing on the ballot, or only local elections on the ballot, tend to be parents with children in school, tend to be teachers and people employed by the school district, tend to be elderly people who are concerned about their property taxes, and some upscale more affluent voters. And that tends to be, with the exception of the elderly, largely supportive of the school district. Unless there's a referendum, let's say, that draws a different class of voters.
That comes next year.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
But by putting it in a primary with high turnout, now primaries for presidential elections aren't always high turnout, but this one was. So you probably had double the voters you normally see in the school board election. And what that meant was that there were a number of voters who probably came to vote without a lot of knowledge of who they were voting for, what the issues were, hadn't paid a lot of attention to the campaign, and therefore that tended to favor people who had put in a greater campaign effort and who already had name recognition. But that said, if I were the superintendent, or if I were in the majority on most of the votes by the Board of Education, I wouldn't really be happy with this turn of events.
Because of the first two places.
Yeah,
well, not just that. I mean,
let's talk about those. Let's talk about how it broke out. Third-time candidate Michelle Monte came in first, followed by Ben Schneider, who's seeking. Is he seeking his third term? I think he's seeking his third term right now. And then he was followed by Tom McDermott. There was only 6 votes separating McDermott and Schneider.
Sure.
And then Lemberger, and then of course we had John Daggett and Mr. Yonke. So, you know, two people who are opposed to the facilities plan that we're currently seeing, you know, were the top two vote getters. So
You could argue that at least, you know, 3 out of the top 4 candidates were opposed to the facilities plan. Mr. Lemberger talked about neighborhood schools, favored maintaining the existing schools and upgrading them rather than the plan. And if, to the extent that you listen to him as a professor of education, I don't think he was terribly happy with any of the curricular plans that they were talking about either. So, not just the incumbent, Mr. McDermott, but I think the other people, 3 who vote with him regularly, couldn't be happy with this outcome either. And I think this shows, especially with Ms. Monty leading in this way, this shows a good deal of dissatisfaction with the behavior of the board, the process, the plans. You've got a group of voters who frequently don't vote in school board elections, and I'm sure they were far more conservative in the sense of more resistance to spending, probably dissatisfaction with perhaps the leadership of the board or the superintendent, and this could very easily carry over to the general election. Maybe lower turnout, but it's going to take a good deal for Mr. McDermott to turn this around.
Okay.
Can you help us in terms of what the impact of the presidential race with the 42% had on the school board? Can you tell us how many more voters cast ballots for the president than for the local school board?
No, I didn't look at that. I saw that turnout was 16,452, and you can't tell from looking at the votes for the individual candidates how many people just bullet voted and only voted for one person versus voting for the 2 which they were eligible to do. Right. So I couldn't break that out.
A follow-up question. There were a high number of Democrats voting for in the Democratic presidential primary, and there was some talk beforehand that this would benefit Professor Lemberger because he was affiliated as former chair of the Winnebago County Democrat. That didn't really happen, did it?
I doubt it. First, you know, would it benefit Democrats? I don't think it did.
Okay.
I mean, if it had, you would have thought that Mr. Lemberger would have done better.
Okay.
But I don't think he was a very visible chairman of the Democratic Party.
Okay.
And I don't think voters tend to translate partisanship to a school board race.
Michelle Monte, on the other hand, listed as one of her contributors the Winnebago Republican Party.
I doubt if that was widely known either.
Okay.
You know, I would just be guessing that would be true. I would be guessing that Mr. Snyder might be Republican too, but frankly, I don't know that for certain either. Certainly, he's never made an issue of it. He's never emphasized it.
Did the 2,000 votes for John Daggett surprise you?
Well, that's why I'm saying that. You know, dissatisfaction can be expressed in a number of ways, and vote for Mr. Daggett could have simply been someone who went to the polls and saw a familiar name. He's run for elections, several offices before. It could have been someone who was picking eeny, meeny, miny, moe that I feel I need to vote, and this name is here. And it could have also been none of the above. You know, a kind of protest vote where you really don't like either the incumbents or the challengers, and you vote for someone else as an expression of that form of dissatisfaction.
What about a candidate or a voter goes in and he wants to vote only for his choice, one candidate, and he figures the safest way to use his second vote is to vote for John Daggett?
That kind of strategic voting is possible too.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
A lot of little games that get played.
Yeah.
What about ballot placement? You know, we always hear about how if you're in the top position on the ballot, you're going to get an extra % of the votes just by virtue of where your name falls.
Sure.
Is
and
that
in
true?
some states, that's why they
rotate.
They rotate, so that it's not A, B, C, D, E, F, or Z, the reverse order, but they rotate them. And randomly place the names. The best position to be is either number 1 or number 2 on the ballot or at the end. What you don't want to be is somewhere in the middle.
Kevin Yankee was 1, and John Lemberger was 6. So throw that out.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting. The Northwestern, Alex Hummel had written that they realized roughly 40% turnout in an election that typically draws 1/4 of that. And then he says, now factor that maybe 50 to 75% of those voters will be on the sidelines, or in other words, stay home come April. So he's saying 50 to 75% of that 40% won't vote come April. I'm not sure, they must have been looking at numbers and analyzing things, but would you kind of concur with that line of thinking there?
Well, maybe that's a bit high. I mean, we might begin seeing higher turnouts just because this is an election year when people are excited, not just at the head of the ticket, but further down. But you're going to see a huge drop-off. And when you do, what you're going to see is a drop-off of middle to lower income voters, somewhat less educated voters. It's going to have a composition more typical of the usual school board race. So that's why, it's possible that Mr. McDermott could pull this out, and Snyder and Monty might not do as well as they did in the primary. But I wouldn't feel too comfortable.
Would you say it's a three-way race, that Lemberger is too far behind on the primary or not?
I wouldn't say that, but I would have to tell you that he's going to have to put in a good campaign effort. I mean, he may be one election away from being on the school board.
Okay, all right. Did you have anything else on the school board race?
Just kind of the idea that, primary is like semifinals and there's no guarantee. We're talking about 50% less turnout. Well, that's a huge variable for, who knows what's going to happen. Now, the only other thing on the ballot then would be the race for the Justice Supreme Court. Would there be one? So there'd be one other race on the ballot, and maybe a constitutional amendment, I'm not sure, but there's no council seats at all. So we're really looking at school board for local total.
Exactly. And that tends to attract the people typically interested in schools.
Right.
Yeah. Right. As opposed to people who are upset about their taxes or,
Well, I have a question yet on the school board race. We look at where people are in their opinions on this facilities plan and boundary issues and what have you, and a possible referendum of, $40 to $60 million. Michelle Monty and Ben Schneider are both right in there, pretty much aligned with each other, almost mirroring each other in a lot of respects. And yet, the vote totals, she had 300 and some votes more than Schneider. What would you attribute that to?
Well, first, when you say plan, I mean, plans. I mean,
well, yes,
I mean,
yes.
I mean, I'm not sure what the plan is. I mean, I've watched, because my wife is a professor of education, I watch the school board meetings whether I want to or not. And the problem is, I don't see a link with what the site councils did or what the consultants said or what happens in any given.
There's no question.
Exactly. There may be some people who are just upset with the entire process and would like to see a superintendent comes in and says, this is what we're going to be doing. You can either vote for that or find someone else. And so it may be that he got 300 fewer votes because he was simply seen as part of a failed process, or like Congress, which is criticized for being polarized and incapable of accomplishing much of anything. So she may have been popular, more popular, simply because she wasn't seen as currently part of that process.
Okay, all right.
Just one more follow-up. If McDermott loses and is replaced by Monte or Schneider or Lemberger, the vote on that board switches from 4-3 to move forward with this plan to 4-3 against moving. Isn't this more than a mixed message?
Well, I'm not sure what unites the three who regularly vote against a plan. I mean, they seem to be in agreement that they're opposed to various things, but they don't seem to have ability to agree on what it is.
Oh, I don't think
they
they have
favor.
a plan.
No.
But-
I mean, when given the opportunity to develop one, they either couldn't do it or they came back with one that they couldn't vote on themselves as modified.
Yeah. Well, it's just going to be interesting to see what happens in April. There's no question about it. And, you know, I guess what we're hearing you say is it could kind of mirror this past election, or it could be vastly different.
Yeah, the best predictor of what's going to happen in general is what happens in the primary, but this was unusual
Very.
enough that
Because of the truth.
this could be atypical.
Yeah, yeah. And the Daggett vote, probably just name recognition there, huh?
Well, it could be a plague on all your camps too. It could be, you know, going in and you don't know any of the names and you pick one.
Well, and he still has a county board race coming up in April. But of course, when he was on this show, he refused to answer any questions about the county board race. So I don't know what that's all about. I don't know why you run for a race and then decide you don't want to discuss your issues.
Well, that's my point. It's not just that he's a perennial candidate, but if you were trying to vote for him on the basis of some agenda, some stated positions, you couldn't because
Right.
he didn't state them, at least not publicly.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the county board. There was a primary that affected the people here in Oshkosh, or at least a section of it. It was Donna Laurie, Claude Thompson, and Harold Steinecke. And of course, as the votes totaled, Donna Laurie and Claude Thompson will be, you know, facing off against each other in April. Thompson had 381 votes and Laurie had 370. Now, both of these folks are currently serving on the county board, but they're having to run against each other because of the redistricting again of the county board. What do you make of this race, and any predictions on what may happen come April? Because it's relatively close.
Well, you know, the candidate who lost is a former board member.
Yes.
So
Yep.
you had something that looked almost like three incumbents, all being forced to.
As a matter of
face off.
fact, he lost to Donna Laurie
Right.
the
and
last election.
Exactly. Well, again, it looks. I mean, this is again a nonpartisan election, but Claude Thompson tends to be someone who is closer to groups like Progress Oshkosh when it comes to board size, budgets, number of committees. You know, voting procedures and so on, and Laurie tends to be on the other side of those issues. So you've got relatively clear choice in this election. So it's not just incumbency here. You have candidates who are offering a choice.
I think that's a good point.
Okay. There was kind of a hotly contested race up in, well, maybe it's not, maybe hotly contested isn't the right way to describe it.
Not this week.
But ugly race up in Menasha for mayor. And, you know, Joe Laux is running up there for, I don't know what term he's seeking. He's been there forever, it seems. A former Common Council member up there, Stan Sevenik, Joe Lingnofsky, James Taylor, all these guys have served on the Common Council with and under Joe Laux, and they're all running against him. Have you followed this race at all up there?
Not terribly closely.
Okay.
He's a mayor, but he also is someone who has more of a managerial persona. I mean, I could imagine him being an administrator for a city. I wouldn't feel too comfortable if I were him either. You have all of these, councilmen running against you, and you get a plurality at best. So we might. There's a good prospect that he won't be mayor after the.
Well, he's one of these folks that you either love him or you hate him, it seems. I don't know that there's a whole lot of middle ground there. And it will be interesting to see what happens. And, you know, if you take, it's coming down to two who are going to go on the ballot, him and the top vote getter here, Donald Merkus. And if you take all the other folks and you add up their votes, yeah, it's really tight. So I see what you're saying there. So, presidential primary. Go ahead.
Yeah, a large Democratic turnout in Winnebago County. Doesn't that portend well for legislative races in the fall?
What makes you say Democratic turnout? Wisconsin doesn't have party registration.
Okay.
And you know, probably a third of the American electorate and at least that many voters in this area are independents. They may lean one way or another, they may not. And I think particularly on the part of Mr. Obama, he tends to attract a lot of people who are independent or who are first-time voters. You look at the students on campus, for many of them first-time voters, and Mr. Obama won that 9-1. Now, is that a Democratic turnout? I don't think so.
I think it is, and I think it'll show up again in November.
Well,
and I think the message of Obama's campaign and the primary is change. And I think there's going to be a lot of change in November, and I think Republicans are going to be in trouble in November.
Well, if you look at the turnout statewide, it was almost 3-1. And this follows a pattern across the country where between 1.5 to 2-1, the vote in the Democratic primary outnumbering the Republican turnout, or turnout for the Republican primary. You look at Mr. McCain's vote here, 2,570. Hillary Clinton got 4,348 in a losing effort. Mr. McCain did win, but you know, nearly everyone admits that the contest is over unless this scandal that the New York Times has unleashed is, you know, has some legs. So, you know, at least, but at the point of the primary, it looked like the contest was nearly over, and Mr. Huckabee seemed to be a vehicle of discontent for conservatives or some Christians who wanted to keep the race going, to force Mr. McCain to identify himself, or at least to align himself with their positions. And he didn't do as well against Mr. Huckabee and Mr. Paul and candidates who had dropped out as Obama did against Clinton. I mean, Obama got 63% of the vote here, and Mr. McCain 60% in a no contest race, really.
Don't you think, though, that Assemblyman Gordon Hentz, with no opponent yet, would be probably in good shape for the fall? Carol Ressler has not announced yet that she's even going to seek a re-election, whereas Jess King has announced. Doesn't it sort of pretend a little bit that this is going to be a good year in the fall for Democrats at the local level?
You see many more Republicans for various offices deciding not to run for re-election. You see it more difficult to raise money. I was looking at the Federal Election Commission to find out just where the money was coming from, how much there was, which candidates it was going to, and who was putting up the money. And Obama in Wisconsin had raised as much money as all the other candidates in both political parties combined. And now that's really unusual, because one of the advantages Republicans usually have is their ability to raise funds. And not this year, at least not so far.
Yeah. Do you think there's any hope for Hillary Clinton's campaign at this stage of the game? I mean, as of this taping, she's had something like 10 or 11 straight losses. Can she, do you think, pull this out still, or no?
One of the things that you've seen since New Hampshire, and especially since South Carolina, is that although the polls show the race to be reasonably tight and competitive, when the actual votes are counted, especially in caucuses, but even in primaries, Mr. Obama outperforms the polls. And that indicates that many people who, you know, decide in the last week, many people who pollsters discount as potential voters are actually turning out, and they're turning out for Mr. Obama. So if he can carry that through, Remember, though, the primary season has been softball. We get to hardball in the general election. Many Democrats are not only uncomfortable, but even antagonistic to the Clinton campaign casting aspersions at Mr. Obama. You know, Bill Clinton comparing the win in South Carolina to Jesse Jackson, or the accusations of plagiarism. We're not going to see that in the general election. They're going to go after him in every which way you can imagine, and probably the independent expenditures, you know, I don't know what we won't see Willie Horton again, or flags, or swift boats, but we'll see whatever the equivalent of those things are in the general.
But we'll also still see the issue of the war in Iraq, and clearly there's a huge difference if Obama is the candidate.
Unfortunately, that was the issue, the overriding issue at the start of this primary season, and because of the effectiveness of the surge, it isn't as powerful, and the economy and other issues have.
Just an editorial, I was a poll worker at Webster Stanley on Tuesday, and of all of the elections I worked in Oshkosh, and it's been 10 years now, it was the most exciting election to be a poll worker. There was just excitement in the air. Older people, I had to go out and get them outside because they were in walkers or they had canes. Young people who had never voted before. I think we registered about 150 new voters there. Men in their 40s coming up and saying, I've never voted before. I'm a little embarrassed. Can I register here to vote? So there was a different type of voter and a lot more voters, and it was very exciting because of that to work on Tuesday.
Well, it's interesting. I would have liked to have seen both candidates. You know, for various reasons, I wasn't able to see Mr. McCain. He put a lot of effort into getting people to turn out. I got several robocalls. I had some contacts, and he got 600 people out at EAA. At the last minute, Obama comes and 6,500 people, mostly by word of mouth, a few announcements here and there, and the electricity in that hall. Now, I've heard Mr. Obama's stump speech so often that I could deliver it myself using the same cadence, but it was still exciting, despite all of that. And it was a long speech. I mean, this seems to be contrary to everything we've learned about modern elections. You don't win on oratory. You don't win on positions. You don't win with a grassroots campaign made up of volunteers. Negative ads are effective. Money matters. You target voters. You go to the base. None of that seems to be working this time around. And you can say that on the Republican side, too. I mean, McCain?
Yeah. All right, very good. Well, we're going to have you back after the general election, and we'll see what's going on here. So anyway, thanks very much for being here. Thanks to Dan and the crew. And as always, thanks to you. We'll see you next time. Until then, take good care. Keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.